Well, here we are again, BJ. Welcome to everyone in the YouTube verse. So, how's your week?
Good. It was a little disheartening. Our season ended. Our high school season ended this week um, with a very close loss. As a big underdog, it was. I don't really believe in moral victories. We played a team that was much higher ranked than us and played them very close. Um, Going into extra points in the last two sets. That was, I mean, it was good in a sense, but we still lost. So I don't know. How about
Yeah,
you?
see,
What's going on with
I'm
you?
I'm more I'm more in the moral victory. If they're getting better, my week was rough. We played three quality teams with a team that's got a lot to work on, and let's see, I had an academic ineligible the first of the week, and it was one day. It was one of the problems we have, and I'm sure a lot of other high school coaches have, is the way the grading systems work now. They don't really track how well the student's doing. It's how well they are at this point in this part of the quarter. And so if you're in early whatever period, trimester, whatever you use, but if you're in the early part, you can get these. I mean, let's put it this way: my player went from an F on Tuesday to a B on Wednesday. That's not magic. That's no, it's on her probably because she needed to get her work together, and that's fine. She learned a lesson, and I know she's a very diligent kid. And it's probably, yeah, if nothing else, the trauma of having to sit out and not be on the bench and all of that stuff, probably has got her attention, and she'll pay more attention to things. But good kid, just one of those things. And actually, I've been really pretty happy with the overall academics this year. Usually, we have some real challenges, and this year, everybody's kept their grades up pretty well. I mean, can you always do better? Sure, but it hasn't been on my team. It hasn't been a huge factor. The varsity had a little bit of a challenge with it, and they worked through it. So that kind of week, but I mean, we got drubbed this week. We got beat at 6-6 in one of the matches, but it was a really good quality team. It was, a team that would probably beat our varsity. So you kind of go, hey, we're not there yet, and that's come back into the gym then on Friday and start working on things, and a couple kids didn't show on Friday, and so didn't give me a reason why, so probably next week they'll play less. That kind of stuff. But it's all, the kinds of things you go through. Hey, I did, I didn't ask in the green room beforehand. Did Mike Murphy's team get through the second round?
They did.
Okay, good for them. I know he's been. I don't like to play favorites, but Mike's been a guest, and he had some challenges. One of his better players went down with an injury that shouldn't probably have happened, but it happens, and life gets in the way. And looks like his girls have rallied, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, they. Mike lives about 4 hours from where I live in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. He lives in very northern Wisconsin. Uh, Ironically, his daughter goes to school here in Sheboygan County at
Hmm.
Lakeland University, um, which is a school that most people probably have not heard of. But she goes to school here, plays volleyball. We had lunch when she came down um, to register and move in. And the interesting thing, and for a lot of the old timers, Jim Coleman was a guy that was instrumental in volleyball. The thing I always think of with Jim, despite many of his incredible accomplishments, is he is the guy who invented the antenna for volleyball, and a hundred other things. But Jim was from this area, northern Illinois, and used to come up to Lakeland when it was Lakeland College and knew it well. So the one time that I got him on the phone, we talked about him coming up here and coming up to the cornfield, which Lakeland is literally surrounded by cornfields. Uh, little campus out in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, Mike had probably his best player go down with an injury, and I thought about having him come on this week because we had Pete on, Dr. Pete Wong, and then we narrowly missed Dr. Wana Coleman, and we had another PhD lined up for last week that couldn't make it due to his professional schedule, which we'll keep that keep that to ourselves for a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe we get him in the next few weeks. We'll see. Maybe once the season starts,
Yeah.
we can get him on because I don't think he travels. But so I thought about having Dr. Mike Murphy on this week, but I know he's traveling and had a heavy travel schedule, so we couldn't. I just didn't
Not a
ask him.
PhD.
No, a dentist. So
There you go.
a doctor, the tooth doctor, the tooth fairy.
Yes. Well, so our listeners know this is probably going to be us. Although I will put this invitation out to anybody who's listening. And by the way, right now, from what I can see, BJ, it's 0. In fact, I should go out
What are you
and
talking
do a
about?
quality
There are
check.
probably thousands of people watching us.
Yeah, there'll be people listening to it, and the podcasts. I am trying to get at least one a week out, and I gotta up that because we have a little back catalog, a few people I have not gotten on. But that's if it's helpful to you, we hope it is. I'll extend this offer to any of our prior guests if they happen to drop in, and usually those kinds of people are like Dan and those kinds of folks. If you want to join us, just ping BJ and give us the link, or we'll give you the link, and you can join us today. But so the topic you had proposed for today, still a valid topic, and one that I know 0 about, or very little about, and that is the idea of the kinds of questions that college coaches would like to ask of players and of their coaches, and maybe of their club coaches as well. If you're evaluating a player, or if you're looking at bringing a player into your program, what are the kinds of questions you ask? And I'm going to kind of defer to you, BJ, because you span those worlds more than I do.
Yeah. So the question came from Ryan Sell, who it runs a state level program in Pennsylvania, and he asked very quickly 2 questions. One was easy, and one is a little bit more difficult. And the first one is, if you're a college coach, what are the 3 things you look for in a kid? I mean, to me, that's simple: athleticism, desire, and intelligence. You've got to have some basic level of athleticism. You have to desire to use it. You have to have that, some sort of a motor to go for the ball, or to go and, get up early in the morning and go lift weights or go play or whatever it is. And then you have to have enough brain power in order to deal with the things that you have to deal with on the court. So that's very simple to me. Um, and then he quickly asked right after that, and this is the harder one: what are some questions you would ask about a player to their high school coaches? So if you were a college coach, what would you ask their high school coaches or their club coaches about? What do you want to know about this kid? And that's a lot. I think that's a lot more difficult to answer.
Yeah. Yeah, and this has come up, questioning or interviewing's come up before, and we were talking about this in the green room before we came on. And I tend to go to the behavioral interviewing kind of approach, which is, tell me about a time you were in a difficult match and what happened. Or if I'm looking at trying to get an idea of how they handle team dynamics, I might ask something like, well, what was what was a difficult team that you were on? And then you bore into kind of what happened and the whole concept behind behavioral interviewing. And I'm not saying it's the best way to interview; it's a way to interview, but it focuses on things that have happened and how they were handled. So if you go back to I think back to the first training I did on that probably 25 years ago now. It was they had these things called stars, right? So because everybody's got to have an acronym, and star was the situation or task they were doing. What action did they take? What was the result? And you can bore into that. So sometimes you'll get somebody who'll talk about a team experience, and you'll as you deal into what they did, you find out, well, it was a great team, but they sat the bench. I mean, that's extreme, but that kind of thing. So I was on this really great team, and well, what actions did you take? What did you do? Oh, I was the backup libero. Okay. Tell me about a time you played. Oh, well, I didn't play that much. Well, tell me about a time you played. Well, actually, I didn't play at all, etc. Or I worked out in practice or whatever. And it's like, okay, you might be a program that's building, and this might be a great high school program, and the backup libero might be exactly the kind of kid that you want for your level, for where your team is, for your talent, all of that. So it's hard to say that in an absolute that somebody's saying I'm the backup libero. Well, it's like, okay, what were you like? What did you do to help the team? And they might say, well, I worked hard in practice and I watched what the other team was doing. So I talked to the number one libero when she was out, when the middle was serving or whatever. And you go, okay, that shows some character. I'd like a kid like that on my team. So I think that rather than saying, hey, are you good at this? Or what are you good at? Getting them to talk about, tell me a time you were good at something, might be a little more revealing. So, and that's all borrowed from, the business world, not from academic or athletics.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, you're going down the same path that I would go. The first thing that came to my mind was in the last season that I was in, which just ended. We had a couple of players who were good, not great, and and as I watched them and work with them, they had obviously not been asked to move to their next level of play. They were pretty stagnant in in their level. So uh, there was some, I would call it, I don't know, strife, maybe a little trouble as I came in, new to the program, and started to ask them to make some improvements. Like, let's get better. And they're kind of looking at me cross-eyed, like, what are you talking about? We're seniors. We're here. But yet, as a college coach, that seniors in high school have a long way to go in their improvement. So we had this kind of ongoing, let's call it a discussion through the year. What are you doing to get better? Like, how are you improving yourself? So that would be my one of my first questions to a high school coach, if I were a college coach, is, what is this player doing? What are you doing? What is the player doing to get better, even though she's at the top of her game right now? Um, to me, that opens up the conversation of, is the player still improving? Does the player have that growth mindset? Are they looking toward playing volleyball at another level? Or are they just happy being good enough? Which is, I think, the place that a couple of our players at at my most recent job are at. They were happy being good enough, and um, to me, in some ways, it was unfortunate because I think they could have been a lot better. Um, and I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, because I had more questions, but
No, I
You
think
think about that
that's
one for a second.
yeah. No, uh, I think people can stagnate, and we're seeing a little bit of that on our varsity, and not so much stagnated, but frustration at this point. You know, we're a young team, but we have a couple of starting seniors who have struggled a little bit because it is frustrating. It is difficult to be, you know, fairly experienced and then go through some of the challenges you have when you have younger players playing with you, and that's a great thing. If I were a college coach, I would want to understand how do they. Well, my favorite. Tell me how they make other players better, and if they, you know, walk me through a time
Right.
they really helped a player get better, or players on the team or the team get better, and what was that dynamic like? I had you know, years ago I had a player who was pretty good. And I got asked by a college coach, which I haven't a whole lot, but it was like, well, what, you know, what's this person like? And my comment was a little flip, but I'm like, they're kind of high maintenance. And, you know, that's something that, you know, they took a lot of work. And, you know, a college coach is going to go, yeah, I'm moving on. Um, but the other thing is, and I have no idea. Oh, that's if you hear. Can you hear that in the background? No, probably not.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's my wife running a vacuum cleaner, and I'll. It's like, do you really need to do that? But that's okay. So,
It's
um,
Sunday morning. You got to clean.
yeah, yeah. We have family in town, so yeah. I think then I've had another one where you kind of go and say, "Hey, this player is a terrific teammate." You know, my favorite. I mean, my very first year of coaching, I had from a teammate perspective, I had the best player. I tell this story all the time, but you know, it was my number one setter. We went to Indy for the qualifier. We were the bottom seed, so we were a pretty inexperienced team. And after the first day of play, so we played the one seed, the 53 and the 54, and got our head, you know, got beat up pretty good. I said, she came up to me and said, "Can I play libero?" And I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Because we're not getting the ball to the setters, and I think I can get the ball to the other two setters." And she played libero for me for the rest of the year, and then went on to play great Division III ball, great teammate. You know, just became an excellent player because she was driven. But you know, she wasn't big. She was fast and athletic, but she wasn't big. And you know, Division III ball suited her well, and she's still in the sports field. I forget where she is these days. I think she's in Cincinnati, but I mean, she's working with pro sports teams now. You know, in the front office, and you know, it's great stuff.
Yeah, I think your question, the question you asked was my second question that I proposed to Ryan, which is how is the player supporting her teammates? What are you doing to help your team get better? How are you helping those players? Because once you do reach some level of competence, if you want to have any team success, I think it's important that you're going to have to help your team get better. The coaches can only help so much, right? Uh, so I think that's a another question. Like you said, I like questions that. I mean, obviously, you want to avoid the yes or no questions. It it really invites them to tell the story of what this player is about, and that's that's an important ask in the recruiting world.
Yeah, I really like that. Tell the story of that player because there's a lot to it, and you know, stories give you a lot more insight than an opinion does. You know,
Yeah, yeah, I
you
agree.
can ask a coach, what was a memorable time that this player did something on the court.
Right.
You know, and with that particular player, I can give you about five, and with some players, I can give you about zero. My one had one player who a notable time was when we were playing a very intense rally in the playoffs, and they hit the libero with the same shot four times in that rally, and it's like, oh, okay, I didn't teach him enough about you got to shoot somewhere else if the guy keeps digging you. That's on me. That's not on him. So
Find a
that
little
happens.
range.
Yep. It's like, well, yeah, yeah. I saw a little video. I know this is a little non sequitur, but on that topic, I saw. I put it on one of my playlists. I think my personal playlist. I should put it in the regular one where people can look. It was really nice. It was like the 5 shots every player needs, and I thought it was really nice because it was nice and short and just walk through. Okay, you know, you need the power, kind of power shot. You need the line shot. You need a flat shot, basically off the top of the block, but basically hitting it flat to get it off the top of the block. You need a cut shot, and you need a tip. And I'm like, I'm thinking about my players and going, do they have those 5 shots? And they don't. And so we need to work on that because we're not going to be a big dominating team. We need to be able to hit, if we can get good at hitting flats off the top of the block, against some of the better teams, and mixing that in with tipping, we can frustrate them enough to get some gains. But you have to be able to do all those. I was telling the boys a story of a kid who he was the son of a friend of mine who's all three. I think all three of his kids went to Dayton. He had twin daughters who played for Dayton, and then his son went there. And the son was this back probably 20 years now, 15 anyway. And his son was known among the message boards at the time, where all the players were exchanging and giving each other crap, right? And all the guys gave him heat because he didn't power the ball. He doesn't hit with power. He's blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, he just scores. You know, he was the best scorer around, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe you ought to think about that.
That's that's the thing lately, at least in terms of motor learning. It probably could be anything, whether it's emotional, psychological. It's finding range, being able to do a wide variety of things, and that's not a new idea. If you go back to oh, I can't remember the study now, but it's a study from the 1920s of blacksmiths hitting their using their hammer to hammer out whatever it is on their anvil. The the author of the study looked at how that blacksmith swings and how they hit the same target every time, and they hit the same target, but the swing is different every single time. So this idea is more than 100 years old. It, it, you need a wide variety. So there are, you're talking about 5 shots. There are an infinite number of shots that a player needs.
Yeah,
They need to learn how to create those shots, and really, there's no way to do it. There's no way to explain to them every shot that you're going to need. They have to get into those styles of play and experiment, right?
yeah, and my knowledge of motor learning and those things is cursory. I'm a coach using what I learned from people who know more than me. Okay. But it's not hard to think about, and typically in a presentation on this, there'll be something along the lines of, well, there really isn't a motor program. It isn't something that you can program into a computer that does it the same every time. Because there's so many different systems and things to take into account. So it's not, you're not writing, I'll date myself. You're not writing a Fortran program to make this work. So but at the end of the day, it is complex. And then it got me thinking about it. I said, with all the permutations and combinations, it's pretty likely that most of us who've played for our entire career have never hit the same ball twice, ever,
Right. Sure.
in the same set of sequences. We've made the ball do something similar every time. And the we talked earlier about prior to getting on about my team struggling with serve receive this week. Well, we had a team with a server. This is one that frustrates me with the boys' side. We had a server who had a really nice float serve, really, really good. Good speed, not super fast. When the girls came off and we talked about, hey, it was really hard to receive this serve today. Their main comment was, "Oh, it really moved a lot." And I'm like, yes, that's the problem with the float serve. And by the way, boys, and we have about 6 boys who help manage the team, and they play against the girls, and they're getting more time, except they're getting used to a low net, and so that's not necessarily a good thing. But um, they I said, guys, you're working on the bomb all the time. You're trying to just crush the ball. And I have guys who have 50% serving or less. And guys, if you spent your time learning a good float serve that you can locate, you're going to be even if it's a standing float serve, if you want to do the jump float, great. But if you come up with a good, consistent float serve, you're going to be so much more successful in general. I mean, yeah, there are people who can have the top spin bomb and can really do great things, but that's rare.
Yeah, maybe. Um, I looked up while you were talking. It's Bernstein's hammer. If you just type into Google Bernstein's hammer, you'll find the, this 100-year-old idea of finding range.
How's
Uh,
Bernstein spelled, just to make sure our folks who watch this can?
I think it's just Bern. Let me look.
Okay,
Bernstein.
okay.
Bernstein's hammer. And the first thing that comes up in Google is uh, the paradox of a hammer. I mean, it's a closed motor skill. You're using a hammer to bang on a piece of metal, so there's no variability in it, except there's a ton of variability because you have to learn as you bring the hammer up. Oh, I brought it up just a little, and this is not something you can tell anyone. There's this is why we, as coaches, we over explain so often. If you bring the hammer up and it feels a little different, your body is going to naturally adjust. If you're any good, to put the hammerhead in the spot that you want, and he shows clearly, and it's been repeated hundreds of times since. But he shows clearly that even though this blacksmith is hitting the same spot every time, the path of this hammer is just slightly different. It's always slightly different. He's always carving some little different piece of the path to get to where he's going. So it's a unique, not really unique. It's a good way of thinking about what our volleyball players are doing. There's a spot on the floor that's open. We have to hit the ball to that spot, or we want to hit the ball to that spot in order to score. The set's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
Even at the college level, where those setters have set, I don't even know, hundreds of thousands of balls, and it's just never the same. Similar, but not the same. So it's a
Yeah.
it's a good study to start with.
I think the other thing there too is then you go, okay, how does that blacksmith get that skill? Well, in general, those kinds of trades start with apprenticeships. And I guarantee you, when you start a blacksmith or a plumber or whatever skill set, you get told what to do. And this gets into situational learning. And I'm borrowing from executive training, but it's the same kind of thing. It's at the beginning. I laugh with folks. I just, when I'm working with clients, I kind of say, hey, listen, um, uh, how long have they been here? Well, they just started. I said, did you show them where the bathrooms are, where the cafeteria is? You need to tell them stuff in the beginning, which gets into maybe more drill like. Show them, not even show them, tell them, here's what you do in the very beginning. It's very directive coaching in the beginning. And over time, then you move to the stage where, let's say I'm with I expect with my boys this year, I'm going to be doing a lot of suggestions. you might try this or that to help you. I have a libero who still likes to rock back when he passes, which is deadly as they get better and faster. He even rocks back when he digs. I'm like, that you're changing the angle of your platform. Try this. Um, but and it would be helpful to me to think about what things should I tell them to try that are more externally oriented, as opposed to try moving your wrist this way. It's, try making the ball do this more. Try contacting, we were talking the other day about topspin, which everybody talks about, and wrist snap and all that. And I was explaining it to someone, and I said, let's talk about that because it's a popular topic on VCT. And for those who don't know what VCT is, Volleyball Coaches and Trainers Facebook page. I would explain it this way: it's not you don't have contact with the ball long enough for a wrist snap to impart by moving from one part of the ball to the other, a spin of sorts. What it does do, or what thinking about snapping your wrist does, and there are other things that can do it, it changes the angle of your hand and the place you hit the ball, with the place you make contact with the ball. So if you get topspin, it means that perhaps the angle of your hand was canted a little bit more down, and you might have hit the ball a little above the center of gravity, which will impart spin. Now, how you get to that, I don't have a fundamental problem with telling someone they should snap their wrist, but I do have a problem with somebody saying, well, the wrist snap is what makes the ball spin. It's just an external, semi-external cue. It's not, your wrist is still part of you, so it's not really external.
Yeah,
But
it's actually an internal cue
well,
because you're talking about
yes,
a wrist.
well, yes and no. Let's not debate that, but it's a
Okay.
cue that they can use. Is it better than saying try to hit the ball a little above the center? I don't know. But it's the physics of what happens and how you get that physics to happen are where the suggestion comes in. Try thinking about it this way. I remember working with somebody who was goofy-footed, and I was telling them, I can't remember exactly how I was telling them to do something about a foot plant or something. I don't know. Back in the day when I was very, internal cue structured, and one person said, just tell them to jump, you know, and all of a sudden, it was or tell them to jump with 2 feet and instead of jumping off of 1 foot or whatever, and just the flipping of the cue was all that person needed. So you may find that you need to try multiple suggestions to make things click. And yes, external is better. It gets them out of their head. If you want to read on that topic, there's what's the self one and self two stuff from both. Let's see, that came out of the Inner Game of Tennis, but I think that also references another coaching work, which is, the author's escaping me right now. It shouldn't, but there are thoughts of self one is kind of I shudder to think, but I have had players come back to me. I can still hear you, coach. And I go, yeah, that's when I was a bad coach. You're still hearing me telling you to move your feet or doing something like that. That's getting in the way of you doing this. Self two kind of knows how to do stuff already. You just let it go, and you let it learn. And so getting that conscious self out of the way, or not even introducing it to begin with, is a challenge for coaches.
Um, yeah, yeah. And I would, one of the first things I probably would suggest is to get away from the word try, as we've talked about, probably ad nauseum, right? Experiment
Well,
with,
yeah, but if you get
test.
into suggestions, then you're going into
Yeah.
do, and then you're going into directive coaching. And if you're saying, hey, you want them to learn on their own and develop the plasticity of being
Yeah.
able to react to a lot of different external stimuli, telling them to do, or to execute perfectly or whatever. I understand the idea of not letting them off the hook with try, but I think you need to be careful with that. It's like any of the semi-dogmatic things we come away from cap training in the old days, or any of these, you just have to be careful to have a continually questioning mind about any of this stuff,
Yeah,
even the stuff we think
yeah.
is better based in science these days, the science we know these days.
Well, and that's my point. I don't want people to, if I give them an idea, I want them to experiment with it. Go and test this, see if this works for you. Um, Find the range of this idea, see if you can, um, make some changes, and test some changes. And the
Yep.
example you gave was, hitting with topspin or hitting the top of the ball, um, and using the wrist snap term. I think you could simply get away with, and I do actually with my youngest kids, my third and fourth graders. I'll say to them, uh, hit hit the ball spinning, and then the next time hit the ball not spinning, and work back and forth, spinning, not spinning, not spinning, so that they're exploring that range. And after they explore for a while, then you can ask them, what did you change? Did you have some success? Yes, we did. Or maybe there's a no, we didn't. Okay, what can we change to make the ball spin? Well, hit the top of the ball. Rather than hitting the bottom of the ball or the side of the ball, hit the top of the ball or hit the ball right in the middle, and see what happens. It gives them a chance to explore for themselves. And then you can step into that next cue, which is closer. It's a proximal, right? A near
Hmm.
cue of hitting the ball, rather than a distal cue, which is farther away and floating or spinning. But you can step into that nearby cue and get them to think a little bit more about the ball and what's going on, and it still stays away from the very
Yeah.
internal cue of move your hand this way or that way, or because I mean, when you watch professional players, and I've got a couple of videos that do this, you can Google slow motion professional attackers, and you'll find a lot of the same videos that I have. The shape of their hand rarely matters, and sometimes they have a hand shape that you would expect the ball to go one way, but because of where they hit the ball, which is the most important thing, the direction of the force and the location of the force, you can do what we would say is a wrist away, which would be for a left side hitter would be a cut shot, but you could be doing a wrist away and it could go line because of where you hit it on the ball. So
Yeah.
that at very high speed, that hand shape doesn't matter all that much because the ball just forms around their hand. So
Yeah.
it,
It's really where the
there
center
are some
mass of that
nuances.
hand is and where the contact
Right.
point is, and
Right.
and
Yeah,
I
you
like
know
what
better than
Ruben
I
has.
do.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but Ruben makes a good point here. That he's slowly gone away, and by the way, I still use that move your feet too much, but move faster to the ball. Um, I do think, and we talked about this offline first, and it kind of coincides with this idea of the range or the si- uh, the journey that you go through. There's a concept in some of the business training called situational learning or situational management, and it's that whole thing of when they're brand new, what do they need? They need a little more directive. So, for example, there are movement patterns, and you can see it in the Karch video I use, where he's talking about that 1 2 3, and you use it 1 2 3 reach. He uses an equivalent of that in that particular video, and that's showing them a movement pattern that is very effective in volleyball. I look at my girls at this point. In retrospect, I probably should have drilled that pattern a little bit early on in the season, because what they still are using is one step, and one knee's almost on the floor, the other knee's bent, and they're like, it's like fencing almost. And then they have a very their platform winds up in a position where there's very limited ability to move it in a way that can adjust to a ball that's moving, that's floating. You know, there's a whole discussion about, don't tell them to watch the ball onto their platform, because they physically can't do that, and we've measured that and all that stuff. I'm going to say I don't agree with that. Not that I do agree with, you can probably measure that they can't see it, but the tracking of it to a spot, especially at least for me playing on a float serve, gave me that if I was in good position with my feet and I was tracking it, I could make that last minute a slight adjustment when that ball did a left turn on me, to get something on it, to get a ball up, in a usable ball up. At least that's what I believe. And again, that may
Right.
not be
That's
ever
what you
be
believe.
scientifically, but beyond that, I don't think science has done. I looked at I've looked at stuff that Peter Vint presented in my Cap 1 course. No, it was Cap 1 or Cap 2. It was my Cap 2 course, and I go, Peter, that's nice. It was where he basically said, hey, you want to get some more height on a jump, just get the sequence so that when you're leaving the floor, your arms are above your head, because your center of mass is higher. You've put the same amount of energy in. So if you start from a 3-inch higher center of mass because your arms are up when you leave the floor, you're going to get 3 inches higher, or whatever, 2 inches, whatever the amount is. And there's some truth to that, but it's such a complex motion that I think that's boiled it down to, what can we measure and what does that tell us? But it doesn't measure everything. So I think that I can understand the science of what you proved, but if I'm using your own argument against you, you go, wait a minute, but you've also told me that this is really complex and probably never happens the same way twice, and there's all these other things. Like, I'm not sure you can prove that as a truth. You can show it in an experiment, in a limited
Yeah.
experiment where you limit the variables. But there's other components to it. So maybe that's a belief, or maybe I can actually, I may not be able to see it on my arms physically, but the act of trying to track it to my arms gets me into a better position to play the ball. Maybe not. I can't. I'm not going to go into the lab and try to prove that. But I also think
Right.
that there's enough players who kind of come back and say that seemed to help me, and maybe it's just getting them to focus a little bit differently. I don't know, but move faster to the ball probably is better than move your feet, or try to go left, right, left, or which gets even more specific and gets. But at the early stages, some of that to get the basic skills, like, okay, how do you what's a good grip to grip a golf club with? If I were to just hand somebody golf club and balls and say hit them, they'd figure out a way to hit the ball. But I might have a better way if I can show them, here's 2 or 3 grips that could be helpful, and try them. That's kind of more of my suggestion idea with them, is to try a couple of these things, and then to use some of the science to say, hey, by the way, wrist away isn't doing what you think it's doing. It's changing where you hit the ball. It's not actually the drop your thumb doesn't really do anything. It just changes the angle your hand hits the ball, and by doing that, it makes it go that way, right? So better
Well, to
understand.
some degree,
Yeah,
the angle of your hand, it depends on how hard you're swinging.
sure.
If you swing hard, the angle of your hand doesn't matter as much. If you're hitting it very easy, the angle of your hand is more important. And going back to your golf analogy, the great golf teacher Harvey Penick, author of Harvey Penick's Little Red Book, and then he's got 3 other books that are very similar. Uh, his first golf lesson is to buy a student a set of golf clubs and say, "Come back in 6 months."
Hmm.
That's the whole first lesson. Go out and see what, learn some things. You gather the strength of the golf swing and you start swinging and hacking at the ball, and then come back when you have questions. And that's a really powerful lesson.
Hmm.
Um, is learning what questions there are. If you don't have any questions, then it's uh, maybe not a great learning environment. Um,
Yeah, I'd argue the duration seems a little excessive, but the concept makes a lot of sense.
yeah. Well, in golf, that's probably how long it takes.
Yeah, could be.
Volleyball is a
Yeah,
little
and I
different.
think that's one of the things that I mean, we do play a lot. We our open gyms in general, I stay out of them mostly. I'm now in the kind of in the mode of, for example, one of the things I'm going to start doing in our scorekeeping when we play is something along the lines of some consequence, either lost points or gain points or whatever, for how we cover. Because as a group, we are, if you look at our both our programs, the girls and boys programs, that's an area where we are not as active and need to be. And when you watch the better teams, they through whatever means they've gotten to. And my guess is it's more drill based coaching, but a lot of it, it's not like drill based coaching doesn't work. It may take longer, and it may not give you as creative a result or flexible as a result. But if you've got people who can execute a more narrow set of parameters when they play because they've drilled them. Yes, if things get more chaotic, they're not going to be as effective. But if they're playing opponents who don't make it chaotic, they can still execute very well and do very well. So, um,
Yeah.
thus the
Only problem with that is you're waiting on the opponent
yeah,
to be something.
yeah,
If the opponent is this, then you win. If the opponent's that, you lose. If you take, in my view, if you take into your own hands your ability to learn or your ability to vary and look for your range, I think you're in a much better place because,
yeah,
you know, if the opponent does this, you can do that. So you change things.
yeah.
Um, Ryan, Ryan and I had one more brief discussion about this, going way back to our original topic, which was
Right.
recruiting questions. Um, Another question that we came up with was, if you, to the coach, from a college coach to a high school coach, if you could have helped your player get better in one area, what would that have been?
Yeah,
And
that's a great
that
question.
allows yeah, it allows a high school or club coach to say, we've been working on this and we haven't gotten there, and I didn't know how, or I couldn't break through, and that opens some windows for that college coach to review and say, all right, was it because of they didn't have the right words? Was it because the kid didn't, um, not the kid, but the player didn't
Hmm.
uh, didn't take to the improvement? But it opens up a good discussion of what happens. I mean, I think probably the biggest thing about recruiting uh, is building the relationship. And
Absolutely.
I think the coaches that I've seen do that the best, and a lot of it. I mean, really, on the men's side, they do this well. I mean, the women's side, obviously, there are great recruiters out there. The men's side, they build this relationship with the kids because there are so many fewer kids, and there have been a ton of men's coaches that will say to a kid, "Look, you're not right for us, but here's a program you should look at."
Hmm.
And that men's coach may even, because they all know each other, that men's coach may even call that other program and say, we'd love to have this kid, but he's going to be buried on our bench. Maybe this is somebody you could use this year.
Right.
and they they're open to that level of they're they're much closer to. I think it's a survival tactic. There are so few men's programs that they want the other men's programs to do well. I mean, they want to
Right.
be better. I want to be better than my
Right.
neighbors, but I want my neighbors to survive,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Uh,
there's another relationship element too, and that's the relationship between the high school coach, depending on your program and all, and the coaches themselves. Now, I
yeah,
don't have a lot of these relationships because I just simply don't have anybody that people are looking at recruiting yet. But I think back to high school. So I was coaching club for a number of years, and on the girls' side was where I spent the first part of my experience in the first decade or so, or most of it, and then the second decade was mostly on the boys' side. So I've enjoyed both. They're not very. They're different. But I remember talking with a high school coach. Turns out was my son's high school, but I would send him a note every year, and I'd say, um, I've got a couple players who are going to be trying out for your program. Here's what they're about. Here's what you're getting. And he sent me a note one time. He said, I don't read club coaches' emails. He said, I read yours because you've never asked me to do anything with a player. All you've told me is what they're like and what they're good at and what, where they need work. And he said, so I'll read yours because that, you're being not straight up with me and you're not asking for anything. You're just saying, here's what's coming. Now, I remember, my favorite story with him was when I had a couple of freshmen, so they would be going into their sophomore year by the next season. And I told them about them. They were my two setters. I was running a 6'2", and this guy always ran a 5'1". And I just sent him a note and I said, you're going to be, when they're seniors, you will be running a 6'2", and they will run it. And he was, I said, but, for now, here's what they're like. Here's what you've got. But I'm telling you, there's a very high chance that you'll be doing that. And that's exactly what happened. But it was interesting to watch because then what happened was one of them made varsity next season, and the other, they had a sophomore and a JV team. So she made the what we would now call a C team, right? And
right.
I
Some
got
do.
this note from her. Yeah, she was crushed. She was like, I can't. And I just said, look, these are the people you're going to be setting in your senior year when you're going to be going to state or whatever you're going to be doing. And he said, you'll know these hitters better than the girls on varsity because that girl's sitting. And by the way, she's a great kid. You both are great. She just happens to be a little better at defense than you right now. Get better at defense and learn all these hitters. Next year, she makes JV, not varsity. She sends me, she's upset. I'm like, you're allowed to be upset for a day. Get upset for a day and then come back and make this team better, which is exactly what she did. And then senior year, the two of them got together and they had the best season the school had in a long time. So, you know, those relationships. So where a college coach trusts you as a high school coach, that you're not trying to sell them. You're just trying to tell them, here's what you're getting. I had a kid at one point that I thought would be good for a fledgling D1 program, but in terms of skill, but I had to be honest with the coach. I said, you know what? Too much drama. Not mature enough yet.
Yeah.
I'd love to tell you you should take them, but you probably shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think probably that and honesty. You just got
Yeah,
to be honest. If a college coach calls you and, there's one I'm thinking of that don't want to give too many details away, but
yeah,
um, the college coach was hanging around and hanging around and hanging around, and the player was a very good player, but had some demons, and the college coach eventually found it out. But it was years that it took for this college coach, and I eventually spoke with the coach and said, I've known about some of these things. And as an outsider, do you do you want to hear about them, or how do you deal with this sort of thing? And the coach said, yeah, we need all the information we can get. You don't want to be a tattletale, but then again, do you want do you want a player taking a spot from somebody else that would be more successful.
Yeah.
And I think I think that honesty piece of it is important.
Yeah, and
Um,
it needs to be based on fact. You may have
yeah,
you got to be careful as a coach to go, hey, I might just not resonate with this player, and that's not a reflection on what they can do or what kind of
yeah,
person they are. It's just we don't click as well, and that's different from somebody who's had a kind of hidden behavioral problem or who just isn't a great teammate. Is a great player but not a great teammate. And in volleyball, I would say in general, being a great teammate is way more important than being a killer player. And I was thinking back, I can't remember the person's name, and it doesn't really matter. But years ago, I know Karch asked somebody not to play. That everybody was like, well, this is the starting. I don't know if it was the opposite. It might have been an opposite or a middle, but it was like, yeah, she's like one of the top 10 players in the world. Why is she not on the team? And Karch was like, because the world revolves around her, and we can't do that on my team.
yeah.
And
People are going to know exactly who you're talking about
yeah, and I'm
if
just,
anybody listens.
yeah,
Yeah,
I have like no memory for names, so and I don't follow the
I know
college
who it
game.
is, but I'm not going to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, and no, you shouldn't. But it's that sort of situation. It's like, okay, if
Right,
you don't think that occurs, there's a great example of where it occurred. And it's like, and that's not taking anything away from the player. It's just for that program and what that program needed interpersonal dynamically, or whatever, however you would say it, socially, whatever. That wasn't going to work.
right,
And that's important.
right. Yeah, that's true. We're up against our hour here, so we should
Yep.
probably hang it up.
Yes, we should. And this one was, well, we rambled a little bit, but, rambling's okay. I do think that, if you are interested in understanding more about what college coaches need when they recruit, and if you're a college coach who wants to come on with us and talk a little bit about that, we'd be happy to have you on as well. But we'll leave it for that, and we'll see you next week.